right, so today I want to talk a bit about the basics of meditation. Some of the stuff I've gone into is a bit more in depth, so I thought it might be worthwhile to just go over the basic process and a little bit about trusting in that for yourself. So our mind is basically engineered and conditioned to be used as a. Try to get this closer. A bad day out there. Our mind is conditioned to achieve something, to get something. And that's the seeking and the searching that we hear so much about. That's not always in a spiritual sense. A lot of the times it's for money or relationships or a million other things that we might be looking for in our life. And not that there's anything wrong with those things, but a lot of the times it can be a substitute for trying to find the peace of mind or wholeness that we're missing inside of ourselves. So we're searching out there for something that's really already inside of us. And so one of the most important things about meditation is understanding that it is not an addition of something that you are missing. Meditation and ultimately enlightenment is not getting something that you don't have already. It's actually the negation of something that you've created that is not really ultimately able to bring you peace or joy. And so this negation process is the refusing to attach to the mind, or the refusal to engage thought as we generally do. And so that's a gradual process generally, and it happens over a course of months or years. And I recommend generally around a half an hour or an hour at a time if you can do that. Really, as much as the more you're able to do it, the quicker the process goes. And I think traditionally that's especially nowadays, that's very difficult for people to wrap their heads around or to trust in that process. You think, okay, I'll sit there and just kind of watch the mind and not engage in it, and it seems to might seem to slow down a little bit, but then it comes back the next day, and you're so what the hell is this? This doesn't work. And so I think that's really where the scientific side of it, as far as the default mode network and all of that process, really drives the point home, as far as this isn't really just a leap. I mean, it's a leap of faith, but you can really visualize the process going on in your mind pretty simply. Like, if you think about the default mode network as being something that is built over time, from a fairly young age, this sense of self and this sense of separation is constructed and built continuously into what it is for the average person, which is basically non-stop machine that's going all the time inside of our mind. And so that's why it's, meditation is very uncomfortable, because it's going against the grain of what you generally do. You usually just, most people don't stop at all. They just are going continuously from one thing to the next all day long. But if they were to stop and meditate, they're met with this machine basically running on autopilot. That's just one thought after another, one identification, one storyline, one fear, one desire after another, and it just goes on and on and on. So I think it's been helpful for me, and I think it will really seal the deal going forward for people, is to think about this literally as just a scientific, biological process that's unfolding, and really just to kind of stand apart from it and watch it happen. Because if you just sit there and stop and watch the mind do its thing, and you surrender to it, you're not feeding the machine anymore. You're not fighting with thought, but you're also not indulging it. You're just saying, do your thing, I'm not taking part of it like I usually do. And that's the process. You're not ever going to add anything to that. There's not going to be some flash of lightning that comes and you'll be transported to another dimension. You've already got everything you need right now. It's just a question of subtracting that interference or kind of feedback, whatever you want to call it, the noise of the mind. And so if you think of the bundle of thought, or however much residual self you've got inside of you that comes into action when you meditate, then that is, we don't quite have a way of, you can measure the studies that they have out there about the default mode network. You can measure how much activity is actually happening in the brain with fMRI, so you can get an idea of how far along you are in this process. Obviously that technology is very expensive, and it's not really at the point where the everyday person can tap into that and see where they're at. But I think that's, as far as I know, that's kind of be a product not too far down the line. I think Silicon Valley is working on that as far as making a more affordable kind of imaging technology for personal use and seeing neural activity, basically. I think you can get personal EEG at this point already, actually. Yeah, so, but from your personal perspective, while you're meditating, it's important to have that attitude of surrendering to the mind. So just, you have to go into it with the expectation of, this is going to be uncomfortable. This is going to be a lot of garbage flowing in front of a lot of mental garbage that I'm going to be watching. And because because the mind is so used to latching on to each thought or each story, when you don't do that, there's a real discomfort with that initially, because it's just, it's your mind ready to go for a ride, and you're just sitting there staring at it. Uh, it doesn't like that. So it's going to feel like you're not making any progress, or it's uncomfortable, and that's actually really a good thing, because it means you're not going for the ride like you usually do. And over time, that feeling starts to dissipate. Your brain starts to recognize that life is actually a lot better without the relentless thinking and analyzing and manipulating and trying to get this or that, this continual hamster wheel. It's just a hell of a lot better without it. It's that simple. See if there's anything else I wrote that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, that discomfort has to be welcomed. You have to be willing to push through that. And the scientific side of it, I think, makes that a lot easier to do, because you can kind of visualize this kind of mass of self or ego that's just has to be pushed through. You have to endure it, in a sense, and let it cry and scream and yell at you, and you just sit there and watch, and it will go away. That is what Lao Tzu was talking about 2,000 years ago, as far as, do you have the patience to let your mud settle? And that's a analogy, but it's also basically dead on, as far as the neural activity being the mud that has to settle in your mind. As you stop feeding this thing, it just stops coming up as often. It's a very simple process, almost just like a muscle. It's letting this thing die gradually over whatever period of time it happens to be for you, which is going to vary person to person. But it has to go one way or the other. The function that I am hoping to increasingly serve is to be somebody that can help you along that process with whatever you need. There are significant distractions and deeply ingrained unconscious habits that will come up to the surface that are not always so easy to let go of or to work through. So that's what I'm here for. If you want to shoot me an email or message me on here, I'm happy to help you any way that I can. And yeah, this is doable. This is very straightforward when it's all said and done. And I don't think, from what I've seen, that there's a ton of people out there that are really making it as straightforward and scientific and simple as I'm doing it. And Gary Weber is kind of one of the pioneers of the neuroscientific side of it, and yeah, I think that's the way it's going to have to go if we want a lot of people to start shifting away from this self-obsessed of living, which is causing so much obvious damage right now. So yeah, holler if you need me. See you guys next time.